To completely go live. One's up, just waiting on the other one kicking off. Yeah, Twitch was a lot quicker there, waiting for YouTube to sort itself out. Now it'll be good to go. There we go. Okay, so I'm doing a talk at a local university this week at some point. And I needed to actually get the talk ready. So I've been working on it for a wee bit. I have not practiced it yet, and I was going to practice it now. And I thought, you know what, it's a good idea, good chance to get some content going again. So I thought I would run through it on here and see how it goes. It's pretty much cybersecurity basics. It's for a cybersecurity module, and I'm just going to cover off a few like various things. There is a live sort of demo bit that I'm not going to do in this stream, but I'll maybe make a video on it at some point. We'll see. But yeah, I wanted to I wanted to run through and practice it, and I thought I may as well do it on here, and someone might watch, maybe. So I'm going to start this as if I'm giving the lecture, so it might seem a bit strange that I'm going to reintroduce myself, but need to keep the flow going. There may be mistakes through this, or maybe parts where I stop, because again, I haven't ran this before, so if some things don't flow right, I might stop and rejigger them as we're going. So, all right. Oh, let's get going. So hello, my name is Brains, and today I'm going to be talking about security incident event monitoring, more or less cybersecurity basics. I've been in cybersecurity now for coming on 10 years, predominantly been on the blue team, the defensive side. I'll talk about the different teams in a wee second. But I've predominantly been on the defensive side of cybersecurity, but very recently I've moved into the offensive side. Done offensive security not as my job for a while, but I've actually moved into it now and started doing it as a day-to-day job. Specifically, I'm in the purple team, but I will get to that in a minute. On. So what we're going to be covering off is all of the colors of cybersecurity. I already mentioned blue team, purple team, red team. We'll cover off what that means in a little bit of terminology. We'll then cover off all of the different tools and techniques that you would use inside a defensive, under the defensive banner of cybersecurity. So typically we're looking at a SOC, a security operations center. And then we'll go into logging, why that's important, because obviously if there's no information logged, we can't see things, so we'll be getting into that. And then we'll be doing some demos at the end where we'll be showing basically the full attack chain. So we'll take the presence of a malicious attacker and attack a system, and then I'll also have a SIM, one of the tools that we're going to talk about, span up to actually see all of the malicious activity that's happening, actually see how that looks in real time and how attackers get around it and all that good stuff. Hopefully the demo is what's going to take up most of the time for the lecture, and not me talking at you. So we will get into that when we get into it. So first things first, the colors of cybersecurity. So I mentioned purple, I mentioned blue, there is also red. That's partly where purple comes from. So the blue team is anything defensive. Any defensive side of cybersecurity is blue team. There's an argument that the end user, so like anyone within the company, is on the blue team because they are ultimately an attacker's way in. It's the easiest way for an attacker to get in is to get a user to do something that they shouldn't be able to do. Get a user to do something that they shouldn't be able to do. And so there's an argument that they are part of the blue team because they also stop those things whenever they report phishing, when they report suspicious calls, all of that good stuff. But the blue team is ultimately anything defensive. So your cybersecurity analysts who are actually actively looking for attacks in the network, your security engineering, the people who set up the tools and stuff that we're going to talk about in a wee minute, your compliance, the unsexy side of cyber, where it's running all the regulations and making sure that new applications or systems are compliant to any applicable laws and regulations. GDPR is a big one here in the EU. All that good stuff. That's the very unsexy side of cybersecurity. IAM, identity and access management. So making sure that accounts are provisioned correctly with the correct access, making sure that only the accounts with the correct permissions can access X devices and managing all that. It is a massive area, I am, and probably worthy of a talk in of itself. That's all blue team. Okay, everything defensive, and I'm missing out hundreds of teams. Cybersecurity is a massive, massive area. For every aspect of cybersecurity, there is an associated subsection specifically related that to cybersecurity and a few of our own. So cybersecurity is absolutely huge area. So that's the blue team. The red team is the offensive side. Okay, it's the people who pretend to be the hackers, um, typically. So, like, say your pen testers or your red teamers or your application security, things like that. They take the stance of the attacker, or in this case, be the threat, and try and break into the company, try and break into the systems, and see how far they get, see what they find, see what they don't. The red team, there can be a bit of us versus them mentality between the red team and the blue team, of them thinking that, well, the red team are just out to get us and find flaws and all of that. I can understand where that mentality comes from. However, it's not the case. We're all on the same team. We're all here with the same end goal, and that is to improve the security and annoy the attackers, annoy the hacking groups. So it's a common sort of us versus them mentality that happens, but it shouldn't be there. And that's kind of where purple team came into it, because red teamers do things completely sneakily. Okay, whenever a red teamer is doing an engagement, they're trying to attack a network, the blue team have no awareness of it. They don't know that a red team engagement is going on, because it's meant to test their detection and response capabilities. So whenever they see a red teamer, if they see them in the network, they have no way of knowing whether it's a red teamer or whether it's an actual threat actor. They don't know when they're happening. They don't know what the process is going to be that they're going to be using. So they have to treat it like an active threat. Again, that then leads into the us versus them mentality, because then if they don't spot them, or if they do and maybe don't respond appropriately, then people can get blamed for things, which is wrong. There should never be a blame game in any of this. So that's where those sort of frictions can come in. So the purple team is meant to be an in-between, a bit of a go-between ground, where it's you take the same stance as an attacker and you let the blue team know that you're doing it. You're going to say, okay, here's this particular technique or tactic or whatever that I'm going to use that we know has been used in the wild against us, and we don't know if we are protected against it. So I'm going to do it now. And did you see it? So that's the way the collaboration works between the purple and the red. It's making them work together. Some companies, the red team does purple stuff. They just have separate exercises. Other companies, like the one where I work, we actually have a dedicated purple team, which is really, really cool and seems, from what I can understand, quite new in the industry, which is cool. So there's a lot of cool stuff like that where it's there's a lot of collaboration going on, and it's meant to help break down those barriers of us versus them, and making the teams work together and having more open conversations between the red team, the offensive side, and the defensive side to ultimately make the security better. So, my face is in the way. Let me just move that. Oh, let me shift me down here. I will not be doing that in the actual lecture, I promise. So, TLAs are the tools. So 3-letter acronyms. I learned that one recently. It's great. So the TLAs are the tools. There are lots of tools that we use within cybersecurity on the defensive side, and that's the ones I'm going to focus on here today for the most part. There's a lot of security tools and systems that we use, and there is also a boatload of acronyms. So I'm going to try and explain a few of them here. I'm going to go through roughly the tools, just quickly here explaining what the acronyms are, and then I'll go through each of the tools in depth in a minute. So the intrusion detection and prevention systems, also known as an IDS or IPS, firewalls, user entity behavior analytics, a UEBA tool, web proxies, security information and event management systems or SIM tools, endpoint detection response, commonly known as an EDR, extended detection response, an XDR, and then data loss prevention, a DLP. Okay, that's the acronyms. That's just explaining what those are. IDS is so an intrusion detection system is there to monitor the network level. Okay, and it can be set up one of two ways. I don't know if I have to in there. No, I don't. It can be set up one of two ways. So either in an IDS perspective or an IPS perspective, and it's the same tool. It's just configured to do slightly different things. An IDS is typically put parallel to a network traffic, so it basically gets a copy of all the network traffic that's going on within the company's infrastructure. It gets mirrored to it. It gets a copy of it and it analyzes it and actually looks through the packets for signatures of attack. Common framework is called Snort, and it's used in the majority of um, industry security IDS, IPS tools out there. Still use Snort rules at their core. It's an open source thing. It's very cool. You can set it up yourself. Um, and it analyzes and looks for attack based on sort of syntax. There's a whole syntax to its rules and how it looks for it, but it analyzes, looks for attacks. An IDS, if it detects something that is an attack, an IDS, an intrusion detection system, will just alert it and fire it to a SIM. We'll talk about that right at the end. But it will then log it as a, hey, there was something that maybe needs to be looked at, and it sends it on. Whenever this is configured into an IPS, an intrusion prevention system, the difference being is that it's in line with the traffic. So the traffic, network traffic is actually going through this device, and it can then actually block things. So as the traffic's going through, it can then actually make a decision and say, do you know what, this is malicious, and I think it's so malicious that I'm going to stop it. Now, an IPS set up in that way can still do detections if it sees something that's like, okay, I don't know if this is actually suspicious or not, but it's unusual and I want it to be at least looked at. It can still do the alerting. The downside to IPSs versus IDSs is that they can slow down the network traffic. They can be a bit of a bottleneck for things. But they also can make those calls faster, they can detect faster, and they can obviously prevent something from actually happening. An IDS, because it's a copy of the network traffic that's going through it, it's a bit slower and takes a bit longer to actually respond to something that's going on. Firewalls, I'm sure most of you know what a firewall is, but basically it'll sit at the end of the at the endpoint of the network, typically right before the internet, and will contain a list of access control rules. So ACLs, access control list, which says what traffic is allowed in and out of the network. There's a directionality to network traffic. Whenever you think of a firewall, there's inbound from the internet, which is typically untrusted. You don't let pretty much anything inbound, so nothing will ever initiate a connection in through a firewall. You really don't want that to happen a lot. You should keep that very, very, very restricted. But it will allow more things outbound, and typically ports 443 and port 80 are always going to be allowed on a firewall because that's internet traffic, and potentially 53 as well for DNS. So there's a lot of stuff that can come in or out of firewalls, but they are just glorified access control lists. There can be more advanced things they can do. There are some firewalls that are also set up with IDS, IPS stuffs baked in, and they can be amalgamated into one, but a bog standard firewall is just access control lists. But modern ones now can do more advanced features like the likes of the IDSs and IPSs as well. UABA tools are new-ish. They've been around for a bit. They were one of the first security tools that I was aware of that uses AI. And the idea behind it is that it creates a pattern fingerprint of users or computers. It creates a sort of standard of this is normal behavior for these devices. And if they deviate from that score, it then, if they deviate from that template, they then get assigned a score. And that score, once it reaches a certain threshold of they've been unusual X amount of times, it can then trigger an alert, which can then go to an analyst. These are very, very, very powerful tools. They can be prone to false positives, and they can be manipulated and trained in a bad way. So if you think what they do whenever you have, say, a new person starting the company, they then start creating a profile on that person. Okay, what's normal for this person? If that person gets compromised by a threat actor early on, so they click on a phishing link that says, hey, complete your first day training, that wasn't actually from the company, and they get compromised by an attacker, the attacker then has free reign because the UABA is still trying to build a profile of that user. So they might think any of that malicious activity is within their job spec and perfectly normal to do. But that is a very fringe case, and it is a small flaw to an otherwise very powerful tool, because this can do things that some tools can't, and that is it can actually help you with 0-day vulnerabilities. So 0 days vulnerabilities, for anyone who doesn't know, is a vulnerability that is brand new. Now, brand new to defenders. Attackers might have been using these vulnerabilities for a very, very long time, but it's as soon as it becomes aware to the security team or security industry as a whole, it then stops being a 0-day. So it's something that we really, it's basically a name for something that we can't defend against because we don't know what it is, and we don't know what it is until it's been exploited. So they're very dangerous things, and we typically look for a lot of ways to try and defend against them, and we use things like defense in depth. So all these tools that I'm showing you are examples of defense in depth, having multiple layers of things to defend against, to defend. And one of the things that a UAB can do is it can actually pick up on anomalous activity, but it's not signature based like an IDS or an IPS, which is, looking for typically signatures or common ways that malware looks or malicious traffic looks on the network. Whereas a UAB is going, okay, this computer, this machine has never spoken to the database server before, but all of a sudden it's making requests. That's unusual. I'm going to flag it. And depending on how your automation is set up, you can even have it automatically stop those connections. So UAB tools are very, very, very powerful, and they can, as I said, spot things that would otherwise not be spottable through, like some signatures or things like that, because it's just looking for unusual behavior from devices or users. So, if Sammy in accountants all of a sudden logs onto a production application server, that's going to be very strange, and that can flag. So that's the kinds of things that this can pick up on. So it is a very, very powerful tool when put in right. Web proxies, surprisingly, another powerful tool. A lot of people overlook this as a thing, but it's basically meant to filter web traffic and monitor web traffic. So I said before that firewalls typically allow ports 80 and 443 outbound. But we still want to analyze that. We still want to make sure that those requests are legitimate. And IDS and IPS can do that, but the traffic's going to be encrypted, especially on particularly on port 443. So how do we unencrypt it to actually analyze it? And that's where web proxies come in. So they basically have certificates. So cryptographic certificates, SSL certificates for the network, the clients, so the actual users' devices that are laptops or servers or anything that might be making web requests will have those certs installed as trusted. So whenever it makes a request out to the internet, it actually goes to the proxy, either through an agent installed on the laptop or routed through the network. Cisco have a protocol called WCCP, I believe it's called, that will route that traffic to a proxy for you, which is quite nice. And what it'll do is it'll then use its certificate to decrypt the traffic, because that's what was used to encrypt it. Analyze it, check for anything malicious, also check and make sure it's going to a site that's allowed, because it is also there to restrict which websites can and can't be accessed within the network. So let's say your company doesn't want you to use Facebook, they could have the web proxy block requests to Facebook, so it can do that as well. But the real power is whenever it's decrypting, so it can decrypt the traffic, analyze it. If it's happy with it, that there's nothing malicious in there, it then re-encrypts it with its own certificate and sends outbound. Another plus of this is that the external website or anything external facing does not know about the end user's laptop, because as far as that web service is concerned, it's the proxy that's making the request, not the end user. You think of it a bit like a VPN, where you've got your device and a VPN server somewhere, and then whenever you send a web request out, it's actually coming out the VPN server. Similar-ish idea, except that the web proxy actually strips out a lot of the information, whereas a VPN wouldn't do that. So they are very cool things. They do protect a lot. Can protect a lot against malicious downloads coming in, phishing. A lot of phishing things can get stopped by web proxies. So someone gets an email, they click on a malicious link. Well, if the proxy has that categorized either as malicious or it just isn't sure, and you have a good implicit deny setup, it can actually stop the user from getting to that website anyway, and can then potentially raise alarm bells from the user's perspective and say, hey, maybe that's not a Microsoft site that I think it is. So proxies are very, very powerful tools. There is a surprising amount of companies that do not have web proxies that should, because they are incredibly powerful. They do require a bit of maintenance, though. They do require for a bit of tuning because they are so destructive in the fact that they analyze SSL packets and things like that. Some web-based communications will freak out if there's SSL inspection going on. J Beers, I recognize that name. Like Burp Suite, or if you're new to upcoming tools, Cadio, both really good web proxy tools. You can also, yeah. So J Beers there is talking about a in-person proxy, not in person, a proxy on the web page, or sorry, on the web page. Put my teeth back in. Proxy on your device, so you can use it as an attacking um as an attacking tool as well. So you can intercept information coming in, manipulate the request and send it out. There's Burp Suite, there's tons of stuff on there. Um, so yeah, web proxies can be used from a malicious perspective as well. But this one that I'm talking about is obviously for a legitimate one inside a company that's looking for looking for malicious attacks, not being the attacker. A misconception, or not a misconception, I guess. A worry is a lot with like free Wi-Fi. A lot of people are worried about free Wi-Fi, someone being in between them and um, capturing information and stuff. I actually had an intern in work recently say, "Hey, do you not use a VPN when you're connecting to free Wi-Fi?" And I don't, for the simple fact that everything's encrypted now. HTTPS, it's all encrypted. If someone captures that traffic, they can't decrypt it. So even if they used a web proxy, say I'm sitting in a coffee shop and they have access to something, they've set up a wireless access point or something like that, and my traffic's going through there. My traffic is still encrypted. The SSL decryption that I was talking about, that a web proxy is able to do, that can decrypt that traffic so they can look at it, the certificate has to be installed on the initiating machine, because that's what's used to encrypt it. So it has to be, I would have to have their malicious certificate installed on my laptop for them to be able to decrypt it. Without it, they can take my traffic all they want. They can't decrypt it, even if they're proxying it, because they don't have a cert, or they don't have the cert that I use to encrypt it. That's a key distinction. That's I know there's still a lot of worry with using free Wi-Fi and stuff like that. Generally speaking, it's very, very difficult to actually decrypt that information. I feel like media has drilled into people's head that they need a VPN or to use free Wi-Fi or get their bank account stolen. If you use a payment gateway on HTTP, that's your problem. Yeah, exactly right. So yeah, there is. I've had a lot of companies actually, a lot of VPN companies say, "Hey, you want to do a sponsored video about a VPN?" And I said, "Sure, but I'm not going to lie about what a VPN can and can't protect you against." None of them have came back to me to say that they want me to do a video. I'll leave that to your imagination. Yeah, a VPN is not the golden condom that will protect you from everything on the internet. It's just not. And you don't need it nearly as much as they say, as what media seems to think that you need it. Now, it's certainly an extra layer, 100%. But also be aware that you're then giving your information, or the potential access to your information, to a VPN company who's potentially not as regulated, especially if you're going for one that's offshore, or in a weird country or whatever. So there's a balancing act to be had there. It can add benefits, it can also add risks, which is honestly the same with all of these security tools. All of them are a balancing act. As I said, web proxies are a very, very powerful defensive tool for analyzing web traffic going out, blocking malicious sites, all that good stuff. But they do take a lot to maintain. You need a team, really, at least, depending on the size of your company. You need at least a dedicated person looking after this thing, babysitting it, kicking the tires. Because if it breaks, internet goes down. If internet goes down for most modern companies, so that's bad. That's money lost very, very, very quickly. So there's a balancing act. There is definitely a balancing act for all things cybersecurity. SIMs. So SIMs, security, incident, and event management tools. I've forgotten the acronym, and I just said it 2 minutes ago. Oh, information and event management. I got it right. My bad. So yeah, a SIM tool. Whenever I'd said before that you've got your IDSs and your IPSs and your web proxy and all these tools can generate alerts. Okay, they all generate logs and information. But if an analyst can't see it, They can't do anything with it. Okay, they have no way of knowing that the web proxy has generated an alert or that the intrusion detection system has picked something up. There's nowhere to know that that is actually a thing unless they go in and check the device manually. But that takes time, effort. That's an absolute pain. And there's also information on, the servers themselves, the laptops, the mobile devices, everything. There's information everywhere that could be what we call an IOC, an indicator of compromise, an indicator that an attacker is on that system. And what we need is a place to put all of that information. And a SIM tool is where we do that. Okay, we collect information, logs, everything from as many places as you can. The more log sources you can get, the better. And then you put it into the SIM tool, and SIM tools can do a lot of very cool aggregation. And that's where they take information, correlate it, sort of link it all together, put the pieces together. Because there could be a case where, let's say, a user downloads a file. That in itself, oh, we're doing blue team. Nice. I'm actually working on in the blue team field now. Oh, nice. Yes, sorry, we're doing blue team. So for those who are new, I'm doing a talk at a uni this week, and this is just me practicing it. So yeah, I'm predominantly blue team, so that's why we're talking about blue team. But I have recently switched into offensive security. So we're also doing a bit of both. So it's later on. I'm not going to be doing it in this stream, but I'll maybe do it later if people want. There's going to be a live demo aspect that I'm going to be doing at the university. I just haven't got the lab environment set up where we're going to be doing attack and defense. I'm going to be being the malicious actor, doing attacks, and then looking through the logs and analyzing what was seen, what could be an indicator, what wasn't seen, how an attacker can hide, all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm going to be doing all that. So yes, was I Sims? Yes, Sims. So let's say a user downloads a malicious file, right? They don't know it's malicious, but they download a file. The web proxy maybe downloads it, logs it, says, hey, this person downloaded a file, but it wasn't overtly malicious in of itself. Okay, cool. Logs it, store it away. User then clicks on the malicious file. Again, nothing overly massive there. Maybe the antivirus doesn't pick it up, the EDR, we'll talk about that I think next. It doesn't pick it up. The malware detonates and then starts sending out communications sends out C2 beacons, so command and control messages out to the attacker's server. And then the IDS, let's say, picks up on that and says, hey, there's communications going out here. And the web proxy seeing those communications and send them out. So the only thing that actually picked up to say, hey, there's something going on there is the intrusion detection system. So how do we know that it's where that came from, how that got on there? Without having logs and having a centralized place to do that, it's almost impossible. But what a SIM will do is it will actually build that picture for you, if it can, out of those log sources and say, hey, we're seeing a C2 beacon. That C2 beacon actually came from this exe. That exe was actually going to this website, and the C2 beacon is calling out to this website, and it will build that picture for you, for the analysts, so they can know multiple things. So the C2 beacon, so a little bit of insight into an attacker's mentality here. An attacker is not likely to be sending a command and control signal out to the same website, the same domain that they used to download the file. Because if downloading the file gets burned, so an attacker or the defenders find out that that is a malicious site that's sending out malicious payloads, they might block it. But if they block it and there's already C2 beacons going on, the attackers don't care because they've still got their connection back into that network. It's still pulling out to another domain. So they usually have them on separate domains. If we didn't have that correlation, we might kill the malicious downloader domain and pat ourselves on the back and go, job done. But really the C2 beacon's still calling out because that other site hasn't been blocked. So having the SIM to correlate all that and actually look and go, okay, well, here's where it was downloaded from. That's where we need to block. But there's also a C2 beacon going out to this server. We also need to block that. And it gives them enough, again, IOCs, indicators of compromise, to actually build a picture of what this attacker's doing. And they can then maybe map that using something like MITRE to actually work out, okay, who's doing this? Or can we see this same pattern anywhere else in the network? Because just because you've caught it here doesn't mean that it hasn't happened within the network already and you just haven't spotted it. So in that case, you can then do a threat hunt using that full picture that you've got because you've had all that information, all that logging. Now, there's a downside to a SIM in that lots of information does not mean lots of useful information. It does take a lot of tuning to be able to um, make it really useful. I worked in a company a while ago who will remain nameless, and I went into their SIM and there was a couple of thousand alerts and God knows how many logs because no one had been looking at it. And because no one had been looking at it, this stuff just piled up. And I went in, looked at that, I was like, what the hell do you want me to do with this? This, like, I cannot sift through 2,000 logs. It hadn't been tuned well, it hadn't been maintained, it was a mess. And so that, as a SIM tool, was useless. It was a very, very, very expensive server room warmer at that point. So, like, there was no point to it. So, SIM tools, very, very useful, but again, they take that maintenance, they take a little bit of dedication to actually keep them up and running. EDRs, this is not your mum's antivirus, but it is antivirus. Endpoint detection and response, basically an enterprise antivirus software. The antivirus software that you would have, say, on your Windows machine, like Microsoft Defender, there is an EDR variant of it called Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, which is an EDR. It does a couple of different things compared to a normal antivirus. Normal antivirus is going to be looking at signatures. So it will have a fingerprint of a malicious file or malicious activity, and it will say, okay, if this thing matches that, it's malicious, end of. But what an EDR will do is it will try and actually look at the bigger picture a little bit and try and build out and see anomalous activity as well as just fingerprinting. So there can be rules and things put in place to say, okay, this kind of activity. So let's take an example of say reading a password file off Linux. Let's say you have a store of clear text passwords. I don't know why you would do that, but let's just assume that you do. So you had a store of clear text passwords on one of your Linux servers, and you were like, right, there is no reason for anyone to touch that. So I'm going to set up a rule in the EDR that if anyone touches that, it's malicious. And some people do this as a form of honeypot to see, if an attacker gets in the network, to be able to basically catch them out, to say, well, there shouldn't be anyone touching this. If there is something touching it, then it's a malicious person and we can then boot them out of the network. And so you can set up rules and things like that. So custom ruling is a big thing within EDRs because it can then allow an analyst to write rules for things that are maybe a bit more bespoke to the company's network that aren't just a one-size-fits-all, which is what the normal antivirus that you get on your home computers is. Just a sort of rubber stamp will catch most of the bad stuff, but is also easy enough to get around by a malicious, an actual sophisticated attacker. Whereas an EDR is made to be able to be tunable and detect more advanced threats. XDR is extended detection response. This one starts blending into a bit of like the intrusion detection system, in that it sort of broadens its scope on what it looks at, and it's really looking for anomalous behavior rather than anomalous files. So all of a sudden, let's say calc.exe suddenly starts calling out to a website. Well, that's unusual because it's a calculator program. It shouldn't be calling out to any website. So an XDR would pick up on that kind of anomalous, weird activity that an antivirus may not. Some antivirus software will see calc.exe running and go, cool, that's a calculator, let it do what it wants. Whereas an XDR can pick up on that and expand. XDR is a little bit of a false flag because it's not really a standalone thing in my opinion. There is probably arguments for it, but in my opinion, it's not a standalone thing. It's just a different flavor of an EDR, or it has some other features that you have paid for, really, in the grand scheme of things. So it's not a completely separate thing like the rest of these. DLP is my absolute favorite. I can't stand DLP, data loss prevention, or data leakage prevention, depending on which one you want to go by. It is useful to stop users, so non-technical users, from accidentally leaking data. That to me is what it's useful for. From a malicious person's perspective, it is so trivially easy to get around these things in their current state that they may as well not be there. And most attackers, just by virtue of them exfiltrating data through whatever means they have, will fool DLP. It will miss it because unless they're sending it out through an email, which some attackers do, DLP is not gonna spot it. So it can be useful, but in my mind, the squeeze is not worth the juice for a DLP. It takes a lot of fiddling. I mentioned before about web proxies being a lot of effort to maintain. DLP is so much more so. It can cause such a headache for the users, and from the blue team side, that users security generally gets a bit of a reputation of being the people who stop the fun and just make people's jobs difficult. DLP is the one that causes that heartache so much. Because it stops people sending emails, it stops people copy and pasting in some cases, stops people uploading files to some places. It can be an absolute pain because a lot of those things can legitimately be needed for the person's job, but DLP is so broad brushstrokes sometimes that it just causes more issues than it's needed, and it can be absolutely painful. So DLP in my mind, it does have its uses, but personally, I'm a little bit biased. I do not like them. So I already mentioned Sims and gathering those logs, but I want to touch upon it again because it is an important point. You have all of these disjointed, disconnected tools that are gathering logs. So not just the security tools, but the web servers with whatever logins on them, the database servers, the users endpoints and workstations, anything, switches, routers, the lot, hubs if you have them. All of these things are generating information, and you really need to have that centralized management. So a sim tool, as I said, takes a bit of work to maintain and look after, but if you have a security posture within a company, you need to have a sim of some shape or form. You need to have that centralized location to be able to link everything together. This illustration, I nicked it from somewhere. I'll need to cite that. But it does quite nice visual of like putting those jigsaw pieces together to actually build out a picture of an attack. And so I just wanted to call that out, that logging is so essential to have visibility within the network. Demo. As I said, I'm not going to do the demo on the live stream. Sorry. I don't have the lab environment set up. I'm going to be doing that tonight. Yeah, tonight. Only other thing I maybe wanted to add in here is potentially the cyber kill chain, which I might do. Hold on. Let me see if I can find a good graphic. Maybe. Not sold on that one. We'll put it in for now. Dolan. I think it'd be good to just call out the offensive side a little bit, because in the demo, what I'm going to be doing, actually I can probably pull up the code if I still have it. I do. Yeah, well, actually, so for anyone who hasn't seen any of those videos, this is my copy of using the Redline Stealer malware. This is trying to create a DLL injection attack. Yeah, sort of works. Let me see if I open Asian test, I think it was. Too much code, so little time. Yeah, this is the one. Oh, the actual malicious code has been deleted. Whoops. So this was like a simple Python. I think it was trying to run code in memory, if I remember correctly. but it was getting binned off by Defender. So not even Defender for Endpoint, just like the standard Defender that's on a Windows box. And so I wanted to use it as an example to sort of show, okay, here's what that looks like, dumping on the network and all of that good stuff. So might do that, but I think I might actually stick with the Redline Stealer, because if I'm going to be using Elastic Cloud. So if anyone's used it, it is a fantastic SIM EDR. It's a whole stack, but there's Elastic Cloud. You can install ELK Stack for free on-prem, but there is a cloud variant because I just don't have the lab infrastructure to run it, because it's a chunky beast to run. So I used the ELK Cloud, and it was immaculate for being able to do these kinds of tests. I had a really nice interface and really showcased sort of the SIMs and how all that stuff ties together. It was really, really good. So I'm using it for the demos. Like I say, I might use this. I might actually just stick with the Redline Stealer, because I think it did get picked up. Because this is the client. Yeah, fiddling with the registry key got picked up. I will maybe add in a reverse shell of some shape or form into here. Yeah, I think I'll add a reverse shell in just to keep that in. But yeah, this got picked up fine, and I think Elastic Stack actually killed it, if I remember right. So I'll maybe need to do something else, or at least take this out, because it was fiddling with the registry keys to put in a piece of malware. Understandably got flagged and killed. So I might need to change that. But yeah, that's going to be the demo, basically, is for going through, running some malicious code that just gets flagged right away. I want something that just gets killed, and then show sort of how we can tweak it, how we manipulate it, and see how much further we get, and see what that looks like on the defensive side. So that's it. That's all I was wanting to talk about today. What are we doing for time? So 42 minutes. That's good. I've got an hour to do this guest lecture Thursday, I think it is. We've got an hour, so that's I think I spent maybe 5 minutes ish chatting with yourselves. So yeah, that should be plenty of time to do a demo, and then time to time for questions at the end of it. Cool. All right. Well, thank you for letting me practice this at you. If you stay to the end, if you manage to stay to the end, more power to you. I don't know. I don't think I would like to listen to me waffle for half an hour, but hey. But yeah, if you just want to see the live demo side, if that wants to be if you think that will make a good video, I'll make that. I don't know how many live streams I'm going to be doing over course now. It's just this one. It seemed to make sense because it was very free flowing and just chatting, practicing the talk. So if you like that, let me know. I'll do it for more of them. I have plenty of talks that I do. Typically it's getting me to shut up. This is the trick. So yeah. Thanks, and I'll see you later.